against the wall, and at that time I didn't speak German very well, and I'd get somebody who said they spoke both languages. I said, "You're the translator, now you tell them that they're going to write out exactly what had happened with all the details, and anybody who lies will be shot." And they would say, "Jawohl," and they would stand, snap to attention, start scribbling. And after I read about 20 affidavits, which always began with the declaration on the penalty of death, I had a pretty good idea what had happened, and I could write a report. Flyers so-and-so and so-and-so, and usually I had, sometimes I had a name, sometimes I had a serial number. Came down this and this town, they were beaten to death, and I've got to go find the body. So I'd ask, "Where's the body?" "Well, the body was thrown in the river." Sometimes it was buried nearby. Go dig up the body. And you excuse me, but there are flashbacks to these events which are very real. I better move on. I dug up bodies with my hands, and I'd write the report. And it was then the basis for prosecution. We also began to run into people roaming around in groups who looked like they were dying. They were skeletons. They wore rags or pajama-like garments. We didn't know the term concentration camp. We knew they were located in various areas. We had a map, and we knew in advance before a tank division would hit an area that there was a camp there of laborers of some kind. And I'd get a report, rush out to the area. The first one was a sub-camp of Buchenwald. Come into the camp with the tanks in there, total chaos. Troops are charging in. The inmates are dying on the floor. They're lying there. You don't know if they're dead or alive. The crematoria have corpses lying on the side. I don't want to get too graphic here. I can't. But the inmates are catching the guards occasionally, beating them to death, burning them alive. Try that one on for size. And I'd go into the Schreibstube, the office, collect the records there, whatever they were, the Totenbücher, the death registries, listing how many people had been killed each day by name. The Germans were very methodical. Put it down, then they'd put next to them the cause of death. Auf der Flucht erschossen was page after page after page, fictitious declaration, shot while trying to escape, or died of typhoid. Every disease was in the camp. Dysentery, lice, you name it. The object for me was to get that evidence and get out of there as fast as I could, and which is what I did, and maybe move on to the next camp because we were moving very rapidly, or get back to headquarters and type up the report, attach the enclosures, present the death registries as evidence, the affidavits which I'd taken from some of the inmates who were able to give affidavits, and there was some. And that case is ready for trial. And I did that in half a dozen camps at least, Mauthausen, Buchenwald, Ebensee. These are names that may have been forgotten, of massive death camps. The people who were arrested in connection with the operations of those camps, or for the murder of flyers, were tried by U.S. military commissions. I had lunch one day about a year or so ago with a very nice lady, a colonel in charge of U.S. military commissions for the U.S. Army, the Pentagon now. She never heard of these things, never heard of them. These military commissions were set up in the Dachau concentration camp. I hammered up the sign. I have a picture of me hammering up that sign. All of my archives of this period are with the Holocaust Museum in Washington. I recommend you go and see them. U.S. Army, Third Army War Crimes trials, War Crimes commissions. And the way they went was that they bring in 30, 40 of the defendants. They had signs on them, like these reserved seating signs on their chest with a number. The court consisted of 3 Army officers. If any of them had any legal training, it was purely coincidental. One was assigned defense counsel, One was assigned as prosecutor. Then the judge had a higher rank. They'd say, Herr Schmidt, stand up. You, Herr Schmidt, jawohl. You are accused of being a guard in the concentration camp at Buchenwald, where inmates were systematically tortured and beaten and starved, and you were accused of being an accomplice to those crimes. What do you have to say? I'm innocent. I was acting under superior orders. I never did anything. I was the cook, or some such malarkey. That's it. Sit down. Next. Herr Schickelgruber, what have you got to say? Get up. Say pretty much the same thing. Good. Sit down. Next. They go down the list. How long did that trial last? About 10 to 20 seconds. And then they'd finish the trials, and the officers would now adjourn to consider the verdicts, go next door, come back 10 minutes later. All the defendants are guilty and sentenced to death. And many of them were taken out and shot or hanged in Landsberg prison. That's what you call instant justice. Or you might say, how horrible, but yet, were they innocent? I saw the camps. We picked them up there. There was no doubt of the massive crimes which were being committed and had been committed there. And these people were somehow connected with it. And so they were tried and found guilty because they had nothing more to say. That was that. Okay? Well, the Nuremberg trial had already started. The Nuremberg trial had two parts. One, the International Military Tribunal, about which everybody knows, Justice Jackson, appointed by the President of the United States, outstanding jurist. Soviet Union appointed some of their one of their outstanding jurists, be a prosecutor and judges. The French did the same. The British did the same. And Goering sat in the dock. Everybody, the films were all on him. And I can't tell you about that because Whitney Harris will tell you about that. And Henry King has already told you something about that. But that eclipsed anything which would happen later or before. My goal was to get out of Germany and never go back. And that didn't work out as I expected either. No sooner did I get home than I received a telegram from the Pentagon saying, "Dear sir, in 3 years they hadn't called me sir." By that time I was a sergeant of infantry. And I'd gotten out with an honorable discharge. Why, I don't know. And 5 battle stars for not having been killed, which was a nice thing to do, to receive. They said, I met a Colonel Mickey Marcus there. That name may mean something to some people. He died as a general fighting the Israeli War of Independence. He said, Benny, we want you to go back to Germany. I said, what for? He said, well, to do what you were doing before, with the trials in Dachau are still going on. We'll make you a full colonel. So they're going to promote me from sergeant to colonel. And I said, I go back into the army? He said, yes. I said, first you have to declare war on Germany and be losing. I said, no way. I'm not going back into the army. He said, well, look, we need you. We need you. Suddenly they needed lawyers. They didn't need us all the time before. I don't blame them. I couldn't dig a ditch. I was a rotten digger. And it's foxholes that I lived in. He said, well, you can go as a civilian. We'll give you equivalent simulated rank. And I said, does that mean that I can tell the lieutenant colonels what to do? He said, yes. I said, no, wait a minute. I went out and called up my girlfriend who'd been waiting patiently for about 10 years. And I said, dear, how would you like to go to Europe for a honeymoon, a brief honeymoon? And she said, this is so sudden. Well, I went, but to give you a preview, I came back 10 years later with 4 children born in Nuremberg. My son Don is here. There's one sample of that, born in Nuremberg. What I did in that interval, I will explain briefly. So I went